Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Okay, so let's continue here and start giving some authorization to our users. Yes. Okay, so to start with, let's create an Auth class. Okay, so instead of let's see here. So instead of us using the way we are doing right now, we're using a function called Auth. And where is that? This is functions.php, and there we go, function Auth. So instead, I want us to convert this into a class, but I'll leave this as it is because it still works in some places. But let me copy that and let's create a new class. Okay, so we're going to add the class in models because that's where all the classes reside. So new file, and of course let's put some PHP tags. Let's save this one as Auth, capital A, UTH.php. Now capitalization of these things is very important, especially when you're using a Linux system because it's case sensitive. And most servers online are running Linux. So this is not a problem on Windows, but Linux is. So just keep in mind the capitalization there. So let's save that. And let's do a class. There we go. And we'll say authentication class. So this is what we're going to use to give authorization to specific pages on our system. So we call it the class Auth. We don't want any constructor because we want to run this as a static class. So I'm going to explain that a little bit. If you did my, you went through my Object Oriented Programming basics, you would know what static functions are, right? But even if you don't know, don't worry, we're going to do this. So the normal way to deal with classes, as you have seen already, let's say in the login page, we say user is equal to new user. So this creates an instance of this class. That way we can manipulate this instance as we please without affecting the original class, because this is an object created from the class blueprint. But there's also another way of accessing things in here, which is using the static way. So in this case, instead of saying auth like this is equal to new auth, this can get a little tiresome sometimes, especially when there's really no reason why we should have a separate instance of auth, because we only have one user that's logged in at a time. So there's really no need to have several instances, which is useful in other cases, for example, like products, where you can have 10 products that you are dealing with, and you might want to have an instance of each product. That makes sense. But because we only have one user that's active at a time, it doesn't make sense to create instances of this auth. So we're going to use it just as a static thing. So instead of then doing this, where we say auth, and then we'll say maybe, I don't know, logged in, maybe we want to check if a user is logged in, right? Something like this. So that would be a function inside auth that checks if the user is logged in and returns either true or false. Now, it doesn't make sense every time we want to do this, we just create a new instance. That would be too much overhead. So instead of doing all this, we'll just simply do this and say auth logged in like this. Okay, so that's much simpler. We don't create any instances, we just check directly in static mode like this. So now the reason why I would create a class instead of just leaving it as a function like this is because once I create all the functions that are related to authentication, it's always a good idea to have them in one particular file and enclosed in one class. That way, when you have another project, you can simply copy this entire class file as it is and put it in another project, and it's ready to go. You can start authenticating your users just like that. Okay, so The important thing to remember is that code reusability is very important because it saves you time over the more projects you do, because clients do like to get their work as quickly as possible. Anyway, so in order for us to be able to do this, we have to have static functions. So for example, already we need a function that is called logged in. Now this will return a true or false depending on whether we are logged in or not. So in order to use it in static mode, I'll have to call it static, but I also want to be able to access it outside the class, meaning that I'm not just going to access this function through other functions that are inside this class, but I'll access it from outside the class like this. So obviously I have to say it's public. So I'll say public, and then I want it to be static. So I'll say static like this. Okay. So all this does is check if I'm logged in. Now, usually when you're logged in, you have a session with user in there, right? So this, as long as this session user is set, then we can return a true or false. So here I can do this and go, if not empty user, and I'm not looking for a particular column, just the user thing altogether, then here we're going to return, actually, if not empty, yes, then let's return true. Otherwise, we're going to return false. Simple and straightforward. Now, sometimes this might not be enough. You may want to actually read from the database to make sure that this user belongs in the database, right? The session, the user that's there, actually exists. So in order to check that, it's an easy thing to do. We can just check for the user, either the ID or something. So let's go in here and see what we can actually use to check, just to be thorough, you know, because somebody can hijack your session and just create a random user that doesn't really exist in the database. So sometimes it's a good idea to even check there. So what we will do is maybe use the email, either the password, or I don't know, what else can we use here? Maybe the username. Regardless, you can use something. So let's use email maybe. So all we need to do is read from the database. So in this case, I can create an instance of DB. Now, the advantage of using functions like this is because whatever resources are used while running this function are discarded immediately after running the function. So, which is a good thing. So here what I'll do is say DB is equal to new database. Let's use a capital D right there. Okay. So now the thing is, you should only do this if you really want to check in the database, but otherwise this function would work just fine as it is right now, right? No big deal. But if you just want to be thorough, you can do this. And so you get here. If it's not empty, that's when we should try that at all. However, if it's empty, let's just return false. So we might as well move this in here as well, just to save time. If we're just returning false, no need to create that. All right, so let's do a check, right? Let's say check is equal to, let's say DB query. So let's run a simple query here where we provide some data. So I'm going to say select all from, okay, so select all from users, and then say select all from users where email is equal to email limit 1. So we need to provide that email. So let's provide it, shall we? We're just going to add the thing directly there and say email, put a pointer, and then I want to get the email from the session. So say session user, and another column here, email, like so. So if this returns a true result, then return true. Now, since this returns either a true, if it doesn't find anything, it will return false, or it will return an array. So since it can return false, we can use that directly in an if statement. We can just say if like this, put that bracket there, and we're done. Then we can move the return true into there like so. So we only return true when that returns true. However, the only issue here is this is all good, that's fine. So you just have to keep in mind that now this auth class has a dependency on database class. So which means if you do copy the auth, you have to copy the database class as well, because otherwise this will not work. So if you want this to be truly independent, you can remove this whole thing and just leave the return true. That's where we don't need to depend on the database class. All right, so from this, we are good to go. Now, this one, we want this to be able to return a column, a specific column. So what we'll say is let's change this function name to get, and then we can supply a column that we want, right? Get email, maybe get something, I don't know. So still, we can say public static function get. Okay, that way we can say get email, and then we'll get an email from the currently logged in user. So this is for getting any column from the currently logged in user, which can be very useful. All right, so far so good. We have logged in, etc, etc. So in case you find yourself needing not to depend on the database class, you can just delete this, as I said, like this, and it will still work fine. Okay. Alrighty then. So with that, we are good to go. And what else do we need here? So I can check if I'm logged in. I can get a specific thing from there. But what other ability we need to be able to check for is whether I am an admin or not. So if the role is admin, then let's do something. And we can use that right here, right? Let me give an example of what I'm talking about here. So if, for example, I say, let's say I have a place where I want the admin to be able to sign up, right? To be able to see. So that's the admin. Or let's say I have one place where the user has to see. So let's give an example here slightly to see the problem that we have currently. So I can say something like auth and then say get, and then I want to get the role like that. So I'll put an if statement and say if the role is equal to admin like this, right? So I'll put an if statement and say if auth admin. This is pretty straightforward and it's going to work. So if I am an admin, whatever is here, I will see. So echo seen by admin, like so. Okay, so seems pretty straightforward. So if I want another place where I want the receptionist to see, so I'm just going to change that to receptionist. Okay, something like this. So this will be seen by the receptionist, this will be seen by the admin. However, there's a slight problem here. The problem is that if I'm an admin and then I have this part that checks to see if I'm a receptionist, it will not match my admin status. So which means I'm going to find a situation where the things that a receptionist can see, an admin cannot see, because an admin obviously is not a receptionist. So this creates a problem. We need a situation where we have ranks that even where if I say this area is for receptionists, automatically the admin should be able to see that place as well. Okay? And then the higher we go, the lower that people can see. So for example, admin can see what says receptionist, but receptionist can't see what says admin. So we need that kind of structure, which we can't just get by doing this, right? So we need a little bit more complex situation here. So let's create a function that will do that for us, because of course we need a function to make things easier. So let's create a function. So here we're going to create another function. So of course it will be static. Now you can put these in order, any order that you want, static, public, or public, static. It doesn't really matter. It will still work just fine. So public static function, and let's call this one access, and let's put row here, like so. So we want access to a specific row, and we want to inquire if this access is correct. So the only way to know is to actually get this, use this function right here to get the row that we want and compare to the row that we are given. So we know that the logged in user has these credentials, right? And then we are given a row here to check against, so we can do something useful here. So what we can do is, let's create an array. I'm just going to call it AAR, or you can call it access if you want. Just to be more, let's use access. So access admin, right? So we'll put all the rows right here. So say admin is equal to, and then here I'm going to create an array. Okay, so admin is equal to an array. Now this array will contain all the people that should access the admin, a place that is named admin. So only the admin, of course, should be able to access that place. So let me duplicate that a few more times. Let's go to where there's just a general user. Maybe let's do this. Actually, let's go in stages. Let's put supervisor. Now you can put as many of these rows as you wish. That's entirely up to you. So we have a supervisor, we have the admin, we have a cashier, right? And then finally, Ctrl+Shift+D, we have just a general user. Okay, maybe customer, I don't know. If you want customers to be able to access this, I have no idea why you do that, but you can put as many as you want. Now this side, you just tell it who has access to supervisor area, and this one is admin, right? Admin and supervisor have access to supervisor area. The same thing with cashier, the admin has access including the supervisor, like so. Pretty straightforward, huh? So if you do this, we can add cashier as well. Okay. Now it's not always going to be like this, where these things are getting, let me move these just so they are much clearer. So tab key there. But you could also add accountant, right? So let's add accountant. Now accountant is different from these others because we don't want the cashier to see the accountant. We don't want the supervisor either to see what the accountant can see. We just want the admin and the accountant to be able to access that accounting area, and that's it. So I guess you get the point here of what I'm trying to get at here. And so now we just need a way to calculate. So this is the row that we've been asked. So somebody can use this in this manner. We'll say auth and then access and say this area should be reserved for the admin. Okay, so we say if, so we just put an if statement, if access admin like this, then do something. So this is admin area. All right, as simple as that. So now if somebody supplies admin there, so what are we supposed to do in order for this to make sense? So we're just going to look for the access in here and check to see if our current user has anything that resembles something that's in here. So First of all, I'm going to say my row, which is the row of the user that is currently logged in. Now this row will be taken from this function right here, which is function get, and then we give it the column that we want, which is row. So how do we do this? We use the word self, right? And then we do that because there's no instances here. We can't say this like that, okay? And then get, and then we put the column, which is the column that we're looking for is row. This would work if we are going to create instances, but we are not. So we're going to use the self instead. So self just means the same class. So this class get row is the current row of the user that's logged in. So we just want to find out if that row is available in one of these arrays. So we're going to use the inArray function. I'm going to say in array, like so. So what are we looking for in this array? We're looking for our row, which is my row. So I'm looking for this row in one of these guys. So I'm going to copy this access admin like so, okay? And then let's say return true. Yes, true. Wait. Okay. If this doesn't work, let's just return false. Pretty straightforward, but we're not always going to be looking for the admin, so we just want to get that row, whatever row was supplied, and put it here. So let's go step by step and see how this actually works. Okay. So let's say I want access supervisor. Okay. So this one is the supervisor area. Yes. So if I ask this question, what will happen is this will be equal to supervisor. So, and then I'll get the row of the user that's currently logged in, right? So I get that row, and then I want to check if this row, which let's say for example, I am logged in as a user, right? That's my row. I'm just a user. And this thing here is asking for a supervisor, right? So what will happen is this one will be equal to user, and then it's going to be here. So I'm checking if user is inside the array of access, and what row are they asking for? It's supervisor, right? So access supervisor, which is this one. So if you look here, can you see user? No, you can't see it. So if it's not in the array here to return false, then we're going to return false. But if they're asking for a user as well here, so user, okay, good. And then this is user. So it's going to be row. Does it exist in the access user? So access user, does user exist here? Yes, it does. So which means I have access. So that's really the simple way it works. So with this simple function, we can limit access to anything on our website. So let me remove that, and we can begin to use this function practically in the next video.